Hello everyone, Phoenix Knight here. Welcome to the channel, and welcome to a new playthrough on the channel. We're back to Gravehold today, as Gravehold needs our help from the Nameless once again as we play Aeon's End by Indie Boards and Cards. This is a very similar game to Astro Knights, which I played last night, and this time we're in control of Breach Magi, trying to defend Gravehold from the Nameless. Our goal is to either take out the Nameless or outlast the Nemesis, except that won't necessarily be true tonight or with today's game, as we'll see in a minute. Actually, I need to get one more pair of tokens out for this. Here we go. So the last things I need are our turn order tokens, and I'll explain what those are for in a second. But first, let's go ahead and meet our Magi. Now, I'm going to get slightly spoilerific with Aeon's End Legacy in this world, but these are two Magi that I've built over the course of my time on the over my time in the Aeon's End world through Aeon's End Legacy. So when you play through that, you actually get a pair of Magi you can use in the campaign after it's over. So our player one today is going to be the offensive mage of this tandem, Nameless. Her special abilities are Dark Blessing. Once per turn, she may discard a card in hand. If I do, deal 1 damage. We've also got Rage of the Sith. Once per turn, when you focus or open a breach, deal 2 damage. And then her special ability for 6 charges is Netherlord's Wrath. Cast any player's prepped spell without discarding it. That spell deals 1 additional damage, and any player returns a spell in their discard pile to their hand. It might be a little bit hard to see with the breach configuration. Let me move it in. Nameless starts with her 1 breach open, 2 and 3 are to the right or to the left, and 4 is down at the bottom. So we've got a ways to go to open that one. Make the way to open her breaches. Paired up with her is the same mage that Nameless went through the campaign with. That would be Solidia, the more supporty mage. Her special abilities are Vengeful Shadows. When you cast 2 or more spells during your casting phase, gain an Aether, which is the currency in this game that you'll use to buy with. Then we've got Power Word Silence. Once per turn during your main phase, you may discard a card in hand. If you do, silence a minion, and Will of the High Priestess. Gain a spell from any supply pile. You may place that spell into any ally's hand. So unlike Nameless' any player on Netherlord's Wrath, where she can affect herself with that, Solidia can't. And any ally gains 2 charges also can't be affected with that. Solidia's got the exact same breach component. As far as the Nemesis is concerned, I actually had a more complex Nemesis in mind for this game, but since I know Conflict Board Gaming is going to be watching this at some point, I wanted to pick out a simpler Nemesis so we can see how the game works. I didn't want to get too complicated with my strategies here. Let me see. I can maybe adjust that glare a little bit. That's just some of the strength of the light down so it's not quite so glary. It might still be a little bit hard to read, but I know these cards are going to be very glary, but you guys don't need to see those anyway. Those are for reference for me. If you do want to see them, though, it's easy enough to bring them up and let them focus, which I'm going to do with our Nemesis today. We are taking on Bladius. He starts off with 40 health, which I've got on a dial up there. When the keyword Unleash comes up from the Nemesis deck, we'll have to deal with this ability. The player with the fewest open breaches suffers 2 damage. There are increased difficulty rules, but we're not going to play with those today. Mainly because I want a quick stream, since I've got another one that I've got to get ready for later tonight, and I want to have dinner beforehand. So for additional rules, if Bladius would draw a card and cannot, it escapes and the players lose. So normally, we'd be able to outlast the Nameless. And as far as our market is concerned, we'll bring the cards up once, but then I won't bring them up again. We've got a Haunted Barrelite as a gem for 3. We need 3 gems, 2 relics, and 4 spells. This is our first gem. You can either gain 2 Aether or discard a card in hand. If you do, gain 2 charges. Then we've got a Leeching Agate. When you gain this, gain a charge and gain 2 Aether. And a Cash Glass for 4. gain 2 Aether, and if there's a cash glass in your discard pile, you may destroy a card in your discard pile. And then our 2 relics are a reflective conduit for 3 Aether. Attach this to any player's breach. When a spell is cast from this breach, the player who cast that spell may return it to their hand instead of discarding it. If they do, discard this. And an Infernal Mirror for 5. Any ally gains 1 charge. Any player gains 2 pulse tokens. You may lose 2 pulse tokens. If you do, cast any player's prepped spell. That spell deals 1 additional damage. And then speaking of spells, we need 4 of them in the market. Our cheapest one is a Draining Touch for 2. Cast, deal 1 damage, and gain a charge. Then we've got a Crescendo Ray for 4. Cast, deal 3 damage, and gain an Aether for each other spell you have prepped. Then we've got a Scrying Bolt for 6. Cast, deal 5 damage. You may lose 1 charge. If you do, reveal the top 2 cards of the Nemesis deck. Return them in any order. And a Reaper's Flame for 7. While prepped, once per turn when you cast another spell, you may gain a card that costs 5 Aether or less from any supply pile. Cast to deal 5 damage. Alright, I think we are all set to get into this game. I'll bring that knife. Oh, it's not in shot anyway. So the way we determine turn order, just like when we were playing Astro Knights yesterday, we determine it through a turn order deck. Once again, we've got 2 player 1 cards, 2 player 2 cards, and a Nemesis turn. So whichever card comes up in the turn order deck, that's whose turn it'll be. I'm not going to bring the turn order cards up to the camera. We'll just go ahead and jump right in on this one. So our first turn up will be player 1. So we're over to Nyrisia. Nyrisia first up is going to go ahead and spend 3 Aether to focus her 3 breach. Actually, yeah, we'll do that. And then since we focused a breach, her Rage of the Sith triggers, which means we'll hit Bladius for 2 damage. Next casting turn that comes up, I'll walk through it nice and slow for conflict for whenever he watches this video. And then since I focused my 3 breach, I can focus a spell to it. I can prep a spell to it. So I'll prep a Spark to 1 and a Nyrisia's Fury to an open 3. One thing to note is normally you couldn't focus to a closed breach, but because I focused it, I can on the same turn. And that'll come back to we'll come back to that in the next main phase for Nyrisia. So we'll draw 5 cards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. And then coming out of the turn order deck next is a Nemesis turn. So the way the Nemesis turn works is you resolve each minion and power card in play from newest to oldest, except we have nothing in play since it's the first turn of the game. And then we draw a card from the top of the turn of the Nemesis deck. And we've got a Ravenous Leviathan. It's got 6 health, so I'll get dice for that. And a persistent effect, Gravehold suffers 2 damage. So anytime the persistent goes off, which will be at the start of every Nemesis turn, that will happen to Gravehold. Gravehold has 30 health. We can lose if that goes to 0 if we're both exhausted, or if Bladius runs out of cards in the Nemesis deck. Next card out of the turn order deck is a Nemesis turn again. So now we go through and check for persistent effects. Gravehold suffers 2 damage from the Ravenous Leviathan. And then we draw a new card from the turn order deck. We've got an Agony Field. I'm actually going to grab some of my card holders so I can play around with the glare a little bit. The Agony Field this time is a discard, destroy a card in hand that costs 2 or more. It's got a power 2 on it. So on a power 2, we can unleash. Any player discards 3 cards in hand and then draws 1. So that'll go off on the next Nemesis turn unless we can do something about that. Next card coming out of the turn order deck is over to Nyrisia. So so now we go through the actual casting phase. So we have to cast the Nyrisia's Fury. We'll point that at Bladius, I think. So we'll bring him down to 37. Nyrisia's Fury says deal a damage, gain an Aether that I can only use to gain a spell, and she gains a charge. So I'll grab a spin down counter for that, and then we'll point another spark at Bladius for another 1 damage. Then we will prep that 1 Aether I think is it isn't going to float away. We also gain a charge from that. We also gain a charge from Nyrisia's Fury. All right, so we prep the question is, am I going to let that float away? And I think the answer is no. We'll spend a crystal. Actually, I think we are going to let that Aether float away. I'd rather have another breach open, especially with now needing as much damage as we can find. So I'll spend 3 crystals to open Nyrisia's 3 breach, which now comes with a +1 damage on cast. Which Rage of the Sith will trigger once again, and Nyrisia will hit Bladius for another 2 damage. And then we'll prep a spark to that 3 breach. Everything will move to Nyrisia's discard pile, and then just like in Astro Knights, when you need to draw from your deck, but your deck's empty, you take your discard pile, flip it over, and then draw 5 from your new deck. And then in the turn order deck, we know it's only Solidia's turns because it's only player 2 cards. So now we move over to Solidia's turn. Solidia is going to prepare a Solidia's Spark to her 1 breach. Then she's going to use her 3 crystals to open her 2 breach outright. And then she's going to prep a spark to that 2 breach. And then we'll draw back up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then, hey, look at that. It's another Solidia card. So we'll point to Solidia's Spark, which says cast, deal 1 damage. If your discard pile contains 4 or more other cards, it only contains... Actually, let's do it this way. We'll spark Bladius for another 1, bringing him down to 33. And now we'll do Solidia's Spark. Now that her discard pile has 4 or more other cards in it, we'll deal 2 additional damage. So that'll be another 3 to Bladius, bringing him down to 30. And we'll gain 1 Aether. We'll actually gain a second one thanks to her Vengeful Shadows. Then we'll prep sparks to 1 and 2, and we've got a total of 5 to buy with. I think that will actually be, a better idea than that is going to be 5 Aether to open her 3 breach outright, and then we'll prep a spark to that. Fortunately, Solidia's Spark does not restrict how Solidia can spend that Aether, whereas Nyrisia's does. 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So now the spin down can go away since we no longer need that. And we will shuffle up the turn order deck to draw again. That Agony Field is probably going to go off since we haven't bought anything from the market yet. Let's see what we get here. That's player 1, so over to Nyrisia. We'll hit Bladius for a total of 3 damage with both of our sparks, 1 coming from a 3 breach. So Bladius is down to 27. Then we'll prep Nyrisia's Fury to 1. 3, Spark to 1, and we've got 3 to buy with. Which we're actually going to hold a crystal in hand. Actually, no, we're not. We're going to buy a Haunted Barrelite for 3. So everything moves over to Nyrisia's discard pile. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. And then coming back to the turn order deck, we're right back to Nyrisia. Hey, look at that. All right, we'll start off with a Nyrisia's Fury. We'll point that at Bladius for 2 damage. That brings him down to 25. We gain an Aether that we can only use to gain a spell, and Nyrisia gets another charge. We'll spark Bladius for another 1, bringing him down to 24. Then we'll prep sparks to 1 and 3. And we've got 3 more to spend. 4 if we get a spell. And I think we are going to get 2 draining touches. We're actually going to do something there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So we'll be coming out of the turn order deck in just a second. Once I get back over there. We've got a Nemesis turn. So going from left to right, Gravehold suffers 2 damage on the Persistent from the Leviathan, down to 26. And then Agony Field ticks down. Now we're drawing a new card. Waylay, unleash twice. Which means so the player with the fewest open breaches takes 2 damage. That's actually going to be Nyrisia, who's going to take a total of 4 damage, bringing her down to 6. And then Gravehold suffers 1 damage for each player turn order deck in the discard pile. So that's another 2 damage to Gravehold, down to 24. Next up, we've got another Nemesis turn. So Gravehold suffers another 2 damage, down to 22. And then Agony Field ticks off, unleash. So Nyrisia takes another 2 damage. Yikes. And then any player discards 3 cards and draws 1. Nyrisia will bin 3 crystals and draw. Okay, that's not total garbage, only mostly garbage. And then once again, we're in a situation again where we've got 2 cards for Solidia. So Agony Field is gone. Solidia's turn next. She will hit Bladius for another 3 with her 2 sparks. That'll bring Bladius down to 21. And looking at her cards, we'll prep a Solidia's spark to her 3, a regular spark to 2, and we've got 3 to buy with, which will be a haunted. It's going to be a leeching agate, I think. So actually, Solidia should have one more, so she should be at 4 right now. I am terrible about remembering Vengeful Shadows. She'll actually grab a Crescendo Ray with that. And all of that will move back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, and hey, look at that. We've got another Solidia card coming out. So Solidia's Spark, and Spark will deal a total of 3 damage. That'll go to Bladius, bringing him down to 18. Then I have 1 Aether from Vengeful Shadows. Then I'll go ahead and prep a Spark to 3, another Spark to 2, and I've got a total of 4 to buy with if I want to, and I think that will be a... That's going to be a Crescendo Ray. Move everything to Solidia's discard pile. 2, 3, 4. This will flip over 5. Okay. And then we'll shuffle up the turn order deck. Hopefully we'll get a different... Hopefully Solidia will actually get to go in the middle of the chaos here, rather than having Nyrisia and Bladius trade their blows. Actually, Nyrisia might want to work on opening that 2 breach so Solidia can take some of the damage from Bladius's unleashes. Unfortunately, Nyrisia had to bin all of her crystals. Let's see what we can do here, though. Player 1, over to Nyrisia. Of course, it might not matter if we were just able to kill him. So, sparking Bladius for another 3 damage. Down to 15. Then we're going to prepare... Let's use the Haunted Barrelite for 2, and we'll prep Nyrisia's Spark to 3. Regular Spark to 1. We'll use that to gain 2 Aether, which will be to focus her 2 breach. and that'll hit, and from Rage of the Sith, that will hit Bladius for another 2 to bring him down to 13. This game is going very quickly, so if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask away. Part of the reason it's going so quickly is because these mages, because Nyrissia and Solidia, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, are actually slightly more powered than what you would normally get in the box for Aeon's End. So our next card coming out of the turn order deck is a Nemesis turn. So Ravenous Leviathan, Gravehold suffers 2 damage again, down to 20. Our next card is a Vile Impaler with 5 health. Minion, persistent effect, Unleash. We might not care about that because we've already got Bladius down to 13 health. Let's see what comes out of the turn order deck. Strike that, we actually do care. So 18 for Gravehold. Nyrissia takes another Unleash from the Impaler, bringing her down to 2. She should be able to focus a Breach this turn, but that's assuming she survives to begin with. Let's see what comes out of the turn order of the Nemesis deck. Gravehold suffers 2 damage, so that'll bring Gravehold down to 16, and any player discards a prepped spell. Solidia will discard a Spark. Now this is both good and bad that Bladius went twice. It's bad because we took a bit more damage than we normally would, but it's also good because we know Bladius isn't going again until we shuffle the turn order deck, and it's possible that we might just kill him before we get there, before we get to that. Not likely, but possible. Player 2 over to Solidia. We'll start off with a Spark. We'll point that at Bladius for another 2 damage, bringing him down to 11. Spark normally does 1, but it's coming out of an open 3 breach. Let's go with a Crescendo Ray to a 3, a Solidia Spark to 2, and we've got 3 to buy with, which I think what we're going to do instead of that is we're going to discard a crystal so we can silence the Vile Impaler. That way, if something goes crazy with the turn order deck, and the Nemesis goes before Nyrissia gets a chance to open her 2 breach, it's not just going to kill Nyrissia. Solidia will grab a Draining Touch. Then we'll move all of those back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. We'll flip over. Now we're over to Nyrissia. We'll start off with a Nyrissia's Fury for 2 damage. That'll go to Bladius. That'll bring him down to 9. That'll give her an Aether that I can only use to get a spell. And she gets a charge out of that. We'll Spark Bladius for another 1, bringing him down to 8. And then we'll prep 2 Draining Touches, 1 to 1, the other to 3. I'll use the Aether that I can only use to get a spell and a crystal to buy a Draining Touch. And then the other 2 will go to open Nyrissia's 2 breach. So now Solidia can start taking some of these unleashes. Rage of the Sith also triggers and brings Bladius down to 6. One, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. And our next card coming out of the turn order deck is Solidia. Not a shock. Solidia will start off with a Crescendo Ray. Actually, he might just be dead here. I think he's just dead here. So we'll start off with a Crescendo Ray out of a 3 breach. We'll point that at Bladius to do 4 damage. Remember, it's normally a 3, but plus 1 because it's coming out of a 3 breach. Out of an open 3 breach, so 4. And then Solidia's Spark. Since Solidia's discard pile has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cards in it, Solidia deals 3 damage and brings Bladius down, technically to -1, but 0 is as low as we can go. So that will do it for this playthrough of Aeon's End. Nyrissia and Solidia take care of business against Bladius. I do really enjoy Aeon's End when I'm able to dig into this. I wanted to do this as a lightning quick stream, though, because I want to be able to have dinner before we get to Game 3 of the Stanley Cup Finals 2017-18 season replay between the Vegas Golden Knights and the Washington Capitals later tonight. Vegas leads the series by a score of 2-1. They will have a chance to take control of this series tonight in Vegas, or in Washington, D.C. Let's see. I believe it's Solidius Spark. Yeah, Solidius Spark, 3 crystals and a spark. And then 3 crystals and 2 sparks for opening hand. I'm just trying to get this reorganized so I can put everything away and have that be quick. Then Nyrissia will do the same thing. But I'm basically rambling a little bit, so we are going to go ahead and wrap this video up. Again, Conflict, if you watch this later in the future and have questions about the game, feel free to ask away. You might also not want to take this as how a typical game of Aeon's End goes. If you want to see a more typical game of how this goes, you could probably watch my early stuff on the channel when I played Aeon's End before these two Magi came into being. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're watching this playthrough in terms of how fast it goes. So let's go ahead and wrap this video up. I'm very rambly at this point. Later tonight, as I mentioned, will be Game 4 of my 2017-18 Stanley Cup Final Season Series replay between the Vegas Golden Knights and the Washington Capitals. Tomorrow, Mystical Munchies will actually at long last start out of the Magic the Gathering Cuisines of the Multiverse cookbook. Hard to believe we've already made so many videos on the channel, and we're only at the first episode of Mystical Munchies, but we will be making the appetizer tomorrow, blueberry scones. Tomorrow afternoon, we're also going to start knocking off some rust as I get ready for my 1985 baseball season replay as we play season ticket baseball. Thank you for watching the video. Please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Be sure to turn on notifications so you get my content. Be well, stay safe, take care of yourselves and your loved ones, and I'll be back with more videos in the future. Until then, take care, everyone.